Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Three Principles Global Community webinar. The Three Principles Global Community, or 3PGC, is a nonprofit organization that's committed to bringing an understanding of the three principles to people throughout the world. Today, we have Sandy Krot with us. Sandy's vision is to make the workplace a setting for creative performance as well as the elevation of the human spirit. She's a pioneer in translating a principled understanding of human thought to leadership and organizational effectiveness. The early years of her career were dedicated to counseling and human development. Sandy was the executive director of one of the first clinics specializing in sharing the three principles. She's certified by the Three Principles Foundation to teach the three principles as discovered and taught by Sidney. The focus of her work today is with Fortune 100 executives, leadership teams, and working groups, helping them achieve extraordinary results by unleashing the power of the human mind. She works with the consulting group Insight Principles and co-authored with Ken Manning and Robin Sharbit, Invisible Power: Insight Principles at Work. Sandy shares her life with her partner, Peter Remick, and together they built their net zero energy home in Northwest Washington. They get out into the awesome Pacific Northwest wilderness as often as they can, sea kayaking, hiking, and backpacking with their dog. And that makes me very jealous. Sandy, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate your being here. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Well, thanks, Bonnie. Hi, everybody. It's nice to see your smiling faces. Yeah, it's been a while. I honestly, I couldn't remember. So that must mean it's been a long time. They get me to do these once a year, whether you need it or not. That's what I like to say. Well, I did have a title for this program. I don't know how many of you noticed the title and are here for that reason. The title of it is Why I Love Bird Watching. It doesn't really sound like a typical webinar for 3PGC. But to be honest with you, I am gonna go there. I'm gonna talk about bird watching, but when Bonnie asked me if I would do one of these webinars, it was over a month ago. And at the time, there was only one crisis going on in the world, and it was a big one, you know, the pandemic. And I thought, well, what should I talk about? What do I want to share? And at the time, I write newsletters every couple of weeks for our group Insight Principles, and frankly, I had gotten a little bored with my pandemic newsletters, and I figured, well, gee, this webinar is not going to be until June. People are going to be sick to death of hearing about the pandemic. So I wrote this newsletter on bird watching, and I thought, well, let me talk about that. But since sending the topic into Bonnie, another crisis has arisen, at least here in the United States. I don't know how many of you are in the United States, but and I say the crisis is in the United States, it's really actually getting a lot of attention all over the globe. So it's not just a US issue. And that has to do with the murder of George Floyd at the hands of a police officer in Minneapolis. And you know, like most of you, I'm sure, I watched that video and was absolutely horrified. And it, of course, brought to mind not just that horrific death of one person, but the whole problem of racial inequality that is a pandemic, really. And so that's really what I wanted to talk about today, but I will weave in, believe it or not, bird watching. when I saw the murder, it was, and then the protests that followed, and I participated in the marches myself, but I got a very familiar feeling marching. Um, it's a feeling I always get when I'm faced with some, I call it man's inhumanity to man, or man's inhumanity to the planet. Um, these huge issues that face us, and I feel so inadequate and almost helpless. So I get out there with my sign, but it doesn't feel very satisfying. And I always remember, I'm old, so I was in college during the Vietnam War, and it was another very unsettled time in the United States, and I was horrified by the Vietnam War, and I saw it as a completely unnecessary war, and but I didn't know what to do. I've had that helpless feeling. I think that's where it started, actually. And so in my really my quest to do something, I would watch the news every night. That's what I would do. I would watch the news every night so I could hear the body count. How many US soldiers had been killed, how many Vietnamese had been killed, how many had been injured. And I would be sickened. It was my ritual. Somehow in my mind at that, in my 20s, I thought I was doing my part to change the world. Well, all it did was bum me out. And it didn't really do anything for the effort, the anti-war effort, or for anybody. But I get that that's a very familiar feeling, that kind of helplessness, and what can I do? Isn't there something I can do? So it came back with this latest wake-up call, I guess you could call it. We're finally looking at racial injustice with a little bit more clear eyes, and more people are horrified with what they're seeing. It's always been there, but many times we have been able to ignore it or temporarily see it and never do anything. When I was younger, like I said, this is a very familiar feeling, this kind of anger and upset about what's going on in the world, and a very early part of the women's movement, and I spent a lot of my time angry and upset. I finally met Sid in 1981, and it wasn't it wasn't a love at first sight with Sid and I. I don't know how many of you have ever heard me talk about it, but the first time I heard Sid, I didn't get it. He was introduced to me by a woman who I was working with at the time. I lived in Eugene, Oregon, and I was working with teens who had been either removed from their home, had run away from home, or had somehow been been thrown out of their house by their parents. And I was doing family counseling. And I was getting zero results, essentially, and I was ready to leave the field of counseling because I was very unhappy with my results. But my clinical neighbor next door, her name is Rita Schuford, she introduced me to Sid. And I agreed to listen to him because she was getting results with her teenage clients, and I wasn't. But I listened to Sid that first time, and I didn't You know, I think what happened for me is that I was in a room full of happy people, and I couldn't take it because I was, you know, I was upset and angry a lot of the time when I was in my 20s. And fortunately for me, Rita hung in there with me. And it took a whole year of having coffee with her and listening to her before I decided to listen to Sid again, go and see him a second time. And that's when I heard something. And what I heard was, and I remember it to this day because I heard it. I mean, he talked for 2 days, but I only heard this one thing, one phrase. And I remember hearing it, and it resonated so deeply in me. I just knew it was true. I knew it was true right to the essence of my soul, um, even though I really didn't know what it meant. And the sentence was, "You live in a world of thought." I heard it. I knew it was true. I didn't know how it could help me, or what it could do for me, or really what it meant. And it took a number of months before I finally started to have some insights about it. And I realized eventually, and trust me, I am still having insights about this one thing. I am by no means do I have it down, but I started to see that nothing in my life or nothing in the world had to change. I didn't have to have a different job. I didn't have to have a different partner. I didn't have to look different. I didn't have to have more money. Nothing had to change in order for me to find peace of mind and happiness. Nothing had to change except my own thinking. That's what I got a glimmer of. And to this day, I feel like I just have a glimmer of. So when I get into these moments of helplessness and anger about some crisis in the world, I remember that. We live in a world of thought. And typically what happens to me when I get that discouraged, I go and I read Sid's books, or I listen to his recordings. And that's what I did this time with the killing of George Floyd. I got out some recordings, and I just, as I don't know, luck would have it, I picked a recording that was so meaningful. Now, unfortunately, fortunately for me, because I've been around so long, I have access to some very early recordings of Sid that aren't available to the general public. Unfortunately, I wish they were, but they're not. And so I can't really play it for you. But I decided to share, I transcribed a portion of it because it's so, well, when you hear it, it's so perfect for what's happening right now. And when I read it, it really, really helped me. It helped me find a path that I think will be a fruitful path to really help the world right now, or really whatever we're facing. So I wanted to read. It's just a little bit, couple of pages, and then we can talk about it. Now, this recording was done in 1978. was before some of you were born, I'm sure. And in 1978, it was, you know, the with the end of the Vietnam War, but we were learning more and more about it, about what had happened during the war. And someone had asked him on this recording. They asked him about the fact that he would say, everything is perfect. Everything that happens is perfect. And the person was asking, now, could you say more about that? I don't see, the world doesn't look perfect to me. So here's what Sid said. Everything is perfect, even though the world is in a mess. Because everybody has a free will and a free mind, and we see life and we create life as we see it. What life is now is a combined effort of everybody's conscious state since the beginning of time. What life is now is a combined effort of everybody's conscious state since the beginning of time. From this imperfection, we have created a mess. If you are on the outside, in the mess, and you try to fix a little part of the mess, that's where you'll be, in the mess. But if you see a fact and you go beyond the mess to the spiritual reality, beyond the ego, and see what is instead of the mess, what isn't, you're clear. You're not contaminated by the outside. Then you can walk in the outside and show people the way. And then somebody from the audience asks him another question, and the person, and I'll read his question. He said, I just was reading a magazine, and I read about a massacre that happened in Cambodia. Again, this is 1978, where an entire village was machine gunned down, babies and old people. And the man said, I can't get the perfection of that. And Sid answered, I know. But what created this situation? The level of consciousness that the world is in today. Raise the level of consciousness, and these things won't happen. To raise the level of consciousness, you must have the courage to look inside and see spiritual facts, which will assist you to see the perfection. And then you can go out and help. As others' levels rise, these things won't happen. You see, you are trying to change the world. Everyone is trying to change the world. We all fall into the same trap. All you are doing is creating more problems because nothing can change. I swear, nothing can change. When you try to change the mess from the mess, you create more mess. All the wise since the beginning of time have said, go inside. That's where it's found. When you realize what inside is, there is the freedom, and you can honestly help. But you must help yourself first. I know it's a totally ridiculous statement to say that the world is perfect. But it's only perfect because it is. Evolution is a very slow process. In a lifetime, we hardly move at all. But find a spiritual fact and you jump levels. You can jump lifetimes. And then you can guide others. It was really uncanny when I read that. I listened to that recording because it just was so appropriate to what's happening. Later on in the recording, a person asks Sid, well, how can I raise my level of consciousness? Which is, of course, the $50,000 question. And Sid said, well, I can't tell you how, because then it would be a technique. And there are no techniques. And then he said, you have to listen to truth and be happy. It's just this, and I remember having these discussions with Sid. I think that's why the recording was so familiar to me and so appropriate, because I remember having conversations with him and he would say that. Listen to truth and be happy. And it's just so ridiculously simple. But when you look at the principles, when you hear the principles, when you realize the truth of the principles, you can only come to one conclusion. And that conclusion is that everything you need is inside. All the answers you need, all the wisdom you need, all the joy you need, everything. Because we're part of the intelligent energy of life. We are part of mind, and we are gifted with consciousness, which is the capacity to be awake and to receive that knowledge. And we have the gift of thought, which, which we can use to create a mess, obviously. But in the principle of thought sits the other fact that we can have a new thought. We could have an insight. We could see something new. We could see an entirely different world. So we've got it made. That's what these principles show us, that we've got it made. It's just that we don't understand it. We don't know it. And we continue to misuse these gifts and create messes. And then we sit in the mess and try to fix the mess. And whatever progress we make is painfully slow, which is just proven by the fact that what I just read was said in 1978, and here we are in 2020, and so back to bird watching. Because I think, for me anyway, when I'm out in nature, I have an easier time seeing the intelligence in life, the intelligence behind life. You know, you see the rhythms and you see the patterns. And the other day, my partner Peter and I were walking the dog, and we're lucky. We live in an area or across the road from us. My 95-year-old neighbor has lots of acres that he built a path or trail on, and we get to walk on that trail. And we were walking the dog, and all of a sudden we heard this squawking, and my dog went right to the spot, and we found this baby raven. Was a nestling. Not even, you know, those of you who are bird watchers, a nestling is too young to fly. It's a bird that's just really recently been hatched, and it doesn't have enough feathers to fly. So we found this raven nestling squawking up a storm, and then we looked right near it, and there were two other raven nestlings, and they were both dead. So what must have happened is, you know, ravens are very big birds, and they nest very high up in trees, 80, 90 feet, you know, 30 meters up, and we couldn't even see the nest. And so what must have happened is, and probably an eagle bombed the nest to steal the babies and for food, and these guys all fell out. Two of them died from the fall, and this one was still alive, and Peter and I took it home and kept it overnight, and then eventually took it to a wildlife rescue place. But this raven didn't survive either. It had so many broken bones that it had to be euthanized. But so things like that happen in nature, and I'm sad. You know, it was very sad, but I don't judge the eagle. You know, I don't. There's a lot of violence in nature, but we don't judge it. We see I guess in a way, I see the perfection. And what a different place that is. What a different perspective that is. What a different vantage point that is, compared to what happens to me when I look at humans, who I tend to judge and have lots of expectations for. And then from that place, I think I'm going to help, or I think I'm going to fix. And it's frustrating. So that's why I love nature, because it reminds me of the intelligence that's in life. It reminds me that we're all doing our best, you know, given how life looks to us. Animals are doing their best. And the other thing why I love nature, why I more specifically love bird watching, is when I first met my partner Peter more than 20 plus years ago, he was a bird watcher and I wasn't. I mean, I liked birds, but I never noticed birds particularly. And we would go on hikes and he would point birds out to me. And often he would be pointing. He said, no, it's right there. You see the third tree and the second branch down. And just as I would find the bird, eventually that it would fly away. So it took me quite a while to even notice birds. But I think the reason I wasn't as good of a bird watcher as he was, I mean, partly because it was a whole new world, and I wasn't I wasn't that hip to it, so I wasn't paying much attention to it. But I think the other reason was because I was always in a hurry. I was in a hurry. And I know I had lots of reasons to be in a hurry. I'm excellent reasons. But they were all reasons that, if I'm honest with myself, they're just excuses to be in a hurry. And you can't bird watch in a hurry. Bird watching really just requires us to be still, to slow down, to be present, to notice, to listen. And if you ever go out, even, I don't even care if you live in the city, there are birds in the city. There are birds that have adapted to life in the city. And they're noisy if you listen. So now, 20 years later, I sometimes see birds that Peter doesn't see. I'm always proud of myself that I point them out, and he missed it. But even more miraculous is when you start to hear them and recognize the sound. And it requires your listening to become more and more acute. And I sometimes wonder, what would it be like to listen to people like that? You see, I don't ever judge birds. Oh, could you not have could your song be a little longer, or could you not be so high pitched? I don't judge birds. But people, oh, I don't like what you're saying. I don't agree with what you're saying. So I'm not going to listen to you. Well, so if I don't listen, how can I help? We can't help someone we don't understand. We can't influence someone we don't understand. So this whole awakening with the murder of George Floyd, for me, it just it woke me up to how easy it is for me to judge, and how easy it is for me not to listen, which I don't do in nature. However, if I can find that lack of judgment and that clarity, quietness of my mind, with my fellow human being, I think that's what Sid was trying to say. If you can see the perfection, because people honestly are just living life based on the reality that they've created with their thinking. They're doing the very best they can. If I had that thinking, I would be doing what they were doing. So I think I got another appreciation. That's the thing about the principles. You never get them down. You just keep learning. You just keep seeing things deeper and deeper. And this latest crisis has really affected me. It's really pushed me to see how much I don't listen, how easy it is for me to go into a very dark place about people, and how easy it is for me to get angry and frustrated and impatient, and how little that does for the world. I remember Sid once saying, I'll never forget this, because before he had his experience, he described himself as a very angry person. And he was very active in the union at the place where he worked. You know, he was a welder, pipe fitter, very active in the union. And he said, you know, I'm pretty sure that I'm doing more for the world sitting in my living room in a beautiful state of mind than I ever did for the world fighting for the union. Now, I don't know that he was telling me to not get out and protest, not try to find a role. And I'm not saying, look, go bird watching. That's what's going to solve the racial injustice in the world. I'm not telling anybody what to do. I'm just getting reminded myself of, it's an inner journey, and this lifetime, it's an inner journey. And the more I look inside and the more I recognize where I'm at, the feeling that I'm living in, the more likely I think I'm going to just find a better feeling to live in, and then go out and see what makes sense to do, and whatever that is. And it, you know, it for me, I like to think that the next time I encounter some unjust behavior, that I will speak up. Either speak up in some way to help correct the situation, or speak up in some way to get into a dialogue with the person who is perpetrating the injustice, to understand them, to see if there's any way in, any way to influence. And I do what you're all doing, which is I share the principles with the world. And I do it in corporations, so I do it with business leaders. But my hope is that each person who learns about the principles, we have another soul out there who is contributing to the positive feeling in the world, and contributing to a rise in consciousness. And that's what's going to that's what'll fix the mess. So we all do our little part, but we have to start with us. And that's really what I see. Okay, you're right. It was 40 minutes. All right, well, I'd love to hear from any of you out there. If you have a question or a comment or an observation, what are you hearing? What are you seeing? What's coming to you? Nobody's
Okay.
Hi.
Hi, Sandy. Boy, I'm one of these people that I have to listen to something a ton of times. I'm big on repeating. So I felt like as I was listening to what you read that Sid said, I just keep wanting to push it back a little bit so I can rehear it.
Hear it again. Let me read it again.
Yeah, and again and again and again for me. But there's a lot in there. But the thing that really came up to me was this idea of like being, he used the term being uncontaminated, and then to go out into the world uncontaminated. That's where it can happen. That's where it just can take so little of the presence of being uncontaminated and what is said and done. And I've seen that with Sid, because he said so little in a way, didn't write a lot of books, and he didn't go on. His talks were usually like 20 minutes or whatever. 40 minutes is great too. But anyhow, there's a lot of truth in that. There's a lot for me to continue to look at in that for myself. And the phrase I use a lot about, I use uncontaminated a lot, but in the age of COVID-19, just the whole word of contamination, that is, but also remaining in that state of, well, I have to be careful here too, that it doesn't get like neutrality. It doesn't mean I'm a doormat and that I don't care. I actually have found, there's a way to be in this world and with people one-on-one, caring a lot and having some strong feelings, but also kind of neutral and grounded. And it's that getting that distance that, like you pointed out so often, of looking at the bigger picture of humanity. And like we're up to some crazy stuff, but the last thing I want to say is like, we're so lucky, I believe, in this understanding because of the hope. It's the undeniable hope of the understanding of the presence of mind and our ability to be, gain insight, to go beyond our own thinking. So I think people are pretty hip. Generally, it's not unique to the three principle community that thought has a lot to do with, stuff. But then people get busy working on their thought with their thought, like I'll positive think and here's a project. But the whole element of mind, of understanding the spiritual aspect of going beyond, like Sid said, going beyond. There's so much hope, undeniable hope. That I don't have to do all the heavy lifting to raise my own consciousness. Right. And then that's hope for other people. Yeah. I've seen too, but yeah, it does start with us. So anyway, the little contamination thing really jumped out at me. Thanks for letting me share. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you, Andrea. Yeah, the hope. It's the antidote to discouragement, and that's what the principles are all about, because they're about the potential to see something new. It's extraordinary what's available to us.
Hi, Sandy. I think I'm up.
Hi.
Hi. I met you 1,000 years ago, but
yes, no,
I don't remember where, but I guess I have two comments. One, when I was watching the two most serious events in my mind, the killing of George Floyd and the 70-year-old man, what caught me was that there were two people who were officers who, in each incident, there was one who went to help. There was a flinch to go help, and they were stopped. And I wondered how they had the right thing. They wanted to do the right thing, but they've been trained, or they're part of a group that says, mm-mm. And anyway, there's no comment on that other than that I saw that and I was like, oh, only. And the other thing is, I was out yesterday with my husband and we were shopping. He went into one store, I went into another, and we both had our masks on. We came out and we went to the car and we were just talking outside the car. And this woman comes up behind us and she was probably, I don't know, 60 years old or so. She didn't have a mask on and she said, you shouldn't be wearing those masks. You're breathing in your own CO2 and it's going to make you sick. And then she walked away and she said something like collusion. I didn't hear exactly, but my husband thinks she said that. And I said, thank you, before she went on to collusion. I just said, thank you. And I started talking to my husband again, and he said, I should go tell her to go F herself. And what did you do in talking? And you got all riled up for good 2 hours. He kept telling me things he should have said to her. But in the beginning, when he first said that, I said, why? She's coming from her own idea of what the reality is. She believes, one way of thinking about this. Why get into it with her? But he did. He had to, And so I'm wondering if that's what you mean. Like, I felt calm afterwards because I didn't engage, and I recognized that she was in her own, world.
Yeah.
And he didn't, and he was all riled up. Is that what you're kind of pointing to? That if
Absolutely. And bless your husband's heart, because Lord knows, been there, done that.
Yeah.
And you suffer. Now she's gone off on her merry way.
Yeah.
She's not even in the room. She's nowhere near you, and we're suffering.
Yeah.
How does this help?
Exactly.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
It just when you step back from it, it's so ridiculous.
Yeah.
But in the moment, we just feel like we're almost, what the feeling is for me? It's righteousness. I feel so right. Like, I'm right and she's wrong.
Yeah.
And if we can recognize, I've gotten better at recognizing that feeling, because it just, talk about a contamination. Whoa.
Yeah.
That's just ego. That's all ego. That's all it is. There's no openness in it. There's no curiosity in it. There's no love in it. There's no compassion in it. There's nothing. It's just all about me, my way, what I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a friend get into it on messaging. I said something about not getting, I think I used the word riled up. I'm not going to get riled up, and it's a good time to be calmed down. She went on about this word, texting, about riled up and what happened and this and that, and you won't have to deal with me anymore. I'm leaving town. And I'm like, what did I say? And so I can see how, everybody's got their point of view, and they want you to engage. They want you to get in that mess. And I'm not doing it. And I'm pretty happy not doing it.
Yeah.
But there is that question of what can we do other than being in our happier space by not engaging when all this is going on. I tell myself I'm too old to go out and protest. I'm in Florida, it's 90 degrees and whatever, and I've never been a protester. So I think I just try just doing that, not engaging, and maybe, I'm teaching my grandchildren what I can about this when they want to listen. So
there'll be people who will ask you, or people who will notice.
Yeah.
They'll notice. They'll say, Carolyn, I noticed you don't engage. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, I'm hoping.
And then you'll share.
Yeah.
Because you've got now someone who's interested, and you can really influence them.
Yeah. Well, this person wants to come over and have a talk about my reaction to it. I said, sure, come on over. I'd love to talk to you about it.
You just listen. You just listen.
Yeah. Yeah.
And see if you want to totally understand, because eventually you'll see something. Oh, I see where either she's I don't know what you'll see. You'll see she's afraid, or she misunderstood something, or whatever.
Yeah.
But once you understand her, you can potentially influence her. But until then,
yeah, right.
it's this.
And I don't want that, because I love her, and so thank you. That's very good. I don't want to use the word advice, because we're not supposed to give advice, but it was a very good.
You can call it whatever you want.
Okay, advice. Thank you.
Any other comments? Reactions?
Hi, Sandy.
Questions?
I see. Oh, go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, throughout this whole thing, one of the things how are you doing today?
Good.
Good. Throughout this whole thing, one of the things I keep coming back to is that everybody's doing the very best that they can given their understanding at the moment. And it's funny because I'll get wrapped up into the news at night or something like that and feel myself getting riled. And then I think, everybody from the police officer to the protester to the guy that's looting the shoes out of the store, they're doing the very best they can given where they're coming from, including a president who, he's doing the best he can given his understanding of the world and how
he
it works.
sees the world.
And
Yeah.
that's always, for me, always so calming to come back to that and realize, okay, that's the home base. They're doing the best they can. I'm doing the best. Everybody's doing the best they can. So where do we go from here? Which that brings up, okay, how do we start teaching this and getting folks to just understand their world, but at the same time start to impart this understanding so that they can, move away from where they're coming from. Again, I guess it's not up to me to try to change that, but it just, it's funny. It's just a whole different level that folks have to get to at some point.
It is a whole different level. Yeah. Now whoever the circle of influence you have, whether it's your family or your neighborhood or your work group or if you happen to be a teacher of this understanding, you can influence even strangers, but don't underestimate the power of your clarity, your calmness, your compassion. I mean, sometimes, I don't know about you, I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but every once in a while I'm just in a really kind of in my head about something, just all caught up about something, and I'll be in the grocery store and the checkout person will be very, very friendly and warm. And it touches me.
Yeah.
It touches me and I move. I don't know this person. I'll never see her again. I'm talking, that's those little, we just grossly underestimate the impact we can have just by being, again, as Sid said, listen to truth and be happy.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. But
the power of being in the presence of a sane person.
It's huge.
Yeah.
Not only that, don't forget to notice and be grateful for yourself for those moments when you, like you said, remember, oh, they're all doing the best they can.
Yeah.
For you to remember, to realize that and to be grateful for, oh man, I'm so glad I realized that.
Yeah.
I don't think we give ourselves enough pats on the back or don't have enough gratitude for those little moments when we remember how the whole system works, when we remember, and to just say thank you or to be able to walk away. It's just, it's so good to find gratitude for those small moments.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you, Sandy.
You're welcome.
Hi, Sandy.
Hi.
I just wanted to, a couple things to thank you for what you shared from Sid. That was just beautiful and perfect. I found myself thinking, I wonder what Sid would say about everything that's going on. And there you go. Because, that wasn't that long ago, in the 70s. And it was just a different kind of unrest, but it was unrest. So thank you for sharing that. And the other thing that I really appreciate this conversation, because I find myself when I'm trying to figure out what to do, like what impact can I have? And I think to myself, and I feel that, live it, live from a place of love, and those that you touch will feel that. And then sometimes that doesn't feel like enough. And Carolyn, I love what you said about your friend. And you said something like, I don't want to say that because I love her. And like, that is so powerful. It's so powerful. I mean, I find that in my own relationships, particularly with my husband, when I get really stuck on my being right, my rightness. And there comes a, a decision point where I decide that it's not worth it. Like, hanging on to my rightness isn't worth it because I love him and because I want to be in that state of love. I'm getting emotional. Because what I find so interesting is, for myself, and like in a conversation like this, it's so easy to discount love. Like to like convince yourself that, oh, love isn't enough. And like, love is powerful, it's what we're made of. It's like what we all want. Even those that are angry and fighting, like, that's what they want too. It's what we all want. And so I'm just reminded, and I appreciate this conversation, to not discount the power of love and the impact that you can make from coming from that place. And I so relate to what you said, Sandy. Like, I will be whatever, just not present, caught up in my thinking, and somebody that I don't even know will give me a warm smile, and it just melts my heart. Like, we don't even have to have words. That's powerful. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Terry. That was beautiful. That was beautiful. The perfect place to stop, really. Let's sit with that. That was beautiful. Well, thank you all for coming, and I wish you all well. See you next year.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sandy. This was really a conversation that touched me very deeply. I really loved what you shared from the Sid tape as well. Thank you.
Feel free to share my email address. I'm happy to answer any other questions that come up.
Okay, I'll put it under the YouTube recording. Yeah, and just to let everybody know that the next webinar is on Monday, June 22nd, and it's with Jamie Sellers.
Oh, and I highly recommend going. He's a dear, and has a lot of wonderful things to share.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I'm excited to hear what he has to share too.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, everyone.
Bye.
See you next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.